Alright, so just a very quick intro here. Sorry, I've been gone for a little while. Today we're going to be having a look at Metal Gear Solid Delta's performance on the PS5 and PC. I know that I haven't uploaded a video in a while. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what I want to do with the channel. Things have been a bit slow. So currently we are on the PS5. I just want to show you the options here quickly. There's not a lot, right? Seeing that it is a console, you can select between graphics mode and quality mode, or performance mode and quality mode, sorry. And it shows you there that performance targets a max of 1080p with the dynamic resolution, upscale to 4K. And then quality mode targets a max of 1440p. Also dynamic 4K and frame rate of 30 frames per second. Now, this video, I just want to make it very clear, I'm not going to be comparing the performance between the PlayStation 5 and the PC. The whole point of these videos would be to just show you what kind of performance you can expect on both platforms, right? To see whether the game is more optimized towards one platform or the other. I just want to show you what I'm going to be testing here. I'm going to be testing from start to finish just this area, right? So we've got a few maps here, whichever Dramushi South, and then we've got the swamplands, and then we've got North, and then the breach section, and then the compound section, right? It's going to be very quick. I'm just going to run through it on both the performance mode and the quality mode, and then do the same on PC as well. All right, so with that said, let's start with the frame rate counting. All right, sorry if I sounded a little bit out of it. It was very late when I recorded that first section. It is the next day. It's this video is taking forever to upload. The reason for that is I just want to explain a little bit about my methodology here. How I test it is I use a program called ther, pronounced teardrop, and how it works is you need to record uncompressed high quality footage. You feed it into this application, and it will then determine the frame rate based on the differences between pixels in the video, right? So if there is a large enough difference in pixels from one frame to the next, it'll recognize that it is a frame. Now, I did sanity test this by comparing my results to Digital Foundry. This tool is nowhere near as extensive as Digital Foundry's tool, right? I just want to put that out there, but it is pretty accurate. And I also tested it using a PC with MSI Afterburner running, and then comparing the output that ther provides me with what MSI Afterburner is giving. And just as an example, this is why you see when there's a black screen, the frame rate drops to 0, right? Because there's no difference in pixels whatsoever. It's just a black screen. So ther just sees that as 0 frames per second. And then it takes a little while for it to pick back up and whatnot. But here you can see that Metal Gear Solid Delta is definitely not maintaining 60 frames per second. And it is disappointing because the visuals in the performance mode, it's not that great, right? You might not be able to see it in this video because I had to record it at 1080p with extremely high no compression bitrate, and then also full color, whatnot. Like it does look a little bit washed out, but it's basically what I had to do to get the video recording, right? And I just wanted to show you this portion here, crossing the bridge. It's very demanding, 45 to 50 frames per second. So not only does it not maintain 60 frames per second, at times it drops quite well below 60 frames per second. And as I said, that's a little bit disappointing. It's not unplayable, right? I wouldn't mind playing this on a console, and also usually your TV is a few feet away from you. My 4K TV, where my PlayStation console would usually be connected to, is about 8 feet away. And that is, I mean, it's really, you don't really notice the visual issues when it's that far away. Now, this villager is the most demanding in my testing, not even just because of the barrel explosions, but overall it is quite heavy due to the enemies probably as well. Maybe we become a little bit more CPU bound when there's a few enemies, which I don't think is the case, because I've seen this game run pretty well at a locked 60 frames per second, or close to, at least on a 9600K CPU. So, I just think that the game's performance overall is pretty bad. Now you can see we're getting consistent 60 frames per second when there's no enemies. And even when there's a large explosion, like the frame rate drops minimally, right? Except for you. Right, as we go around this corner here, and also the frame rate drops quite a lot. So, I mean, you do have your demanding areas, not so demanding areas, and this is not even the most demanding area in the game. It's just the most demanding area that I've tested. All right, let's move on to quality mode. Now, if you remember in the beginning of the video, I showed you that quality mode targets 30 frames per second, which is quite typical for consoles nowadays. And for the most part, in these first sections, it does maintain 30 frames per second, but it does happen with uneven frame pacing. You can see the frame time graph there. There's a couple of frame time spikes to 50 milliseconds, give or take. And that's one thing that I do want to improve on. I just want to see if I can improve how the frame time is displayed. But you can see that it does flicker between or jump between 29 and 30 frames per second quite often. And it's not only me that sees it, so it's not just my recording, that the teardrop recording that shows it this way. Many people have reported this exact same issue. So there are a lot of frame time drops, and it is kind of annoying in the sense that when you are in a firefight and the frame rate drops from 30 to 25, like, you do notice that even with the controller aiming, input latency is not really that big a concern with the controller until you drop below 30 frames per second. That's my personal opinion, of course. When we drop below 30 frames per second, I do feel the input latency even on a controller, and it's not ideal. So over here, the more heavier area that used to drop to around 51 frames per second previously in performance mode, now stays around 30 frames per second, which was kind of surprising. I was expecting it to drop a lot more over here. The recording for quality mode is not going to be that long. I just the next part is basically the compound, which is a little bit more demanding, and then we'll move on to the PC version. But I just wanted to give you an idea what the performance is like on the quality mode as well. Now, I have to say that quality mode does look a lot better than performance mode, but I still wouldn't prefer to play in quality mode just because of the 30 frames per second cap, and also the fact that it does drop below 30 frames per second at times. And even with the controller, that's noticeable. It's somebody like me that struggles with the controller. I'm used to playing keyboard and mouse. The issue is just compounded when the frame rate does drop below 30 frames per second, which arguably doesn't happen all that much, but when it does happen, especially in a firefight, it is definitely noticeable. I accidentally ran out of barrels to destroy, so I'm just going to throw a few grenades here to see if we can get frame rate drops here. So you can see that the frame time now shows a max of 733 and then 433. So that's one thing that I do want to try and fix, just to get that a little bit more stable, a little bit more static. I went into the menu and came back, and that's why the frame time there was a little bit messed up. Alright, with that all said and done, it's time for the PC version. Alright, so here we are with the PC that I'm going to be testing. Let me just show you the specs here quickly. I'm using a Core i7-14700KF, and that is paired with 32 gigabytes of 7200 megatrons per second CL34 memory. And we also have an RTX 5080 with the latest graphics drivers, everything running completely stock. Okay, so I am using Shadowplay for this recording, just so you are aware. The performance hit is around 2-3%, right? So nothing much. Currently, we are at 1440p on the maximum setting with DLSS set to native. It's ultra. There's not a lot of settings here. It's ultra, high, medium, low, right? And then the only options that you can change is shadows, textures, and global illumination. Now, these are also the heaviest, but there's really nothing much you can change here in terms of the settings. And the game is locked to 60 frames per second. I forgot to show you that. Okay, so you can install a mod to get past this limitation, although I'm not sure if the game's physics are tied to the frame rate. I've seen some people say that it is. which is kind of strange because it is an Unreal Engine 5 game. But anyway, here we are. So this is actually one of the more heavy areas. This is where that's why I'm starting to test here. It is the swamplands, and we do drop below 60 frames per second here. This is version 1.1.2 on the PC. I did check, console hasn't received, or my console at least, hasn't received the 1.1.2 on the PlayStation 5 yet, but PC did get an update today. So anyway, we'll just be testing this. You can see, like, it's really not dropping that much below 60 frames per second, but it does drop below 60 frames per second. And this mud is quite annoying. All right, so quite a heavy area there. And if you just drop down to the high preset, you will get 60 frames per second. But the other thing that I want to show you is that I find it extremely baffling that the game is so demanding, because this is how big the maps are. We started here. Here's the crocodiles, and now we're getting to the next part of the map. This next map is just as small. Next map is just as small. Like, it is just such small maps, yet the game is so extremely demanding. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to run all the way to the end with all of the maps, just with these settings, and then we'll probably just do some preset scaling. Just want to see what the presets look like. We're not going to increase the frame rate by changing presets because we're locked to 60 right now. You can enable smooth motion if you have an NVIDIA 40 series or above GPU. You can use AFMF, and that should get you past the 60 frames per second cap, as that frame generation is driver level frame gen, and it's not game aware, so it'll just interpolate frames so you can get 120 frames per second, right? If you can maintain 60 frames per second in game, that is. All right, so I'm just resetting the numbers past every section because it does load. Very, very strange that in 2025 with Unreal Engine 5, we still have these extremely tiny maps and that require loading, and they are extremely heavy as well. Now, this bridge has caused me a lot of issues. I keep on falling off. It's very, very easy to fall off this bridge here. All right, I'm just running around shooting everybody. This is not how you're supposed to play the game. I'm just running around shooting everybody, and okay, just so we can get to the next stage, and then we'll kind of repeat the same test at 4K, but then we'll test DLSS and the different presets, etc. Because obviously at the moment we are getting 60 frames per second most of the time, and you won't gain much except for GPU usage and power draw reduction by lowering the settings, right? There are other areas that are more demanding, so later on you might need to drop down to DLSS quality or the high preset to maintain 60 frames per second. But over here we are close to maintaining 60 frames per second all of the time. I'd say we probably maintained at 99.9 and it just went down. Right, so there are some slightly heavier areas still. All right, so but for the most part it is around 60 frames per second, which is very heavy. But also it's Unreal Engine 5 on the Ultra preset, and we know how heavy that can be. Unnecessarily heavy, and especially in this case because the maps are so small. All right, I'm just going to kill some of these dudes, and then we'll just do some preset scaling to see what not the performance, what the visuals look like, and then we'll test at 4K, see what we need to do to maintain 60 frames per second there. All right, so just going to be standing still. Yeah, I'm going to remove. Actually, let me leave this up. Right, I'm just going to remove the lows. So we're using around 300 watt on our GPU here. So I'm just going to drop down to the high preset. That went down to 236 watt, still 60 frames per second, right? Now, there's not that big a difference between ultra and high. So this is probably where I'd play the game, 1440p high, and maybe enable smooth motion in NVIDIA or AFMF with Radeon. And then if we drop down to medium, the game can still look okay at medium. unless you pixel peep, I don't think you're going to be bothered too much by playing on medium. I think it still looks plenty okay. Our GPU power draw went down a little bit more. And then lastly, if we just go down to the low settings, this is where it gets funny. Like, there's just no lighting, no shadows, no nothing, right? This is, I don't know, it looks similar to what 7 Days to Die did right at release. I don't know if you guys played that, but the grass, everything just reminds me of 7 Days to Die way back at release. And the game looks horrible on the low preset. Maybe it's worth it to play like this if you don't want to be ambushed by enemies, because you will be able to see every single enemy. Nobody can hide in the shadows because there's no shadows. All right, okay, enough of that. So let's change this over to 4K and see what we need to do to maintain 60 frames per second at 4K. All right, so here we are at 4K and DLSS and native ultra preset, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to be doing the whole benchmark run again. I'm just going to show you the performance here at 4K and what we can do to get a little bit of a high frame rate or maintain 60 frames per second. All right, and here we are with 37 frames per second. This is, I don't know, this is very rough. It's really kind of disappointing because there we go. As I said, the maps are so small, and I get it, it's the ultra preset Unreal Engine 5. It is very, very demanding with lumen and nanite and the virtual shadow maps and whatever, right? But I don't know, the visuals to me don't justify the performance, especially if you have a look at how small these maps are. There's just no way this is justified. Like, I don't know. This is just my opinion. I'm probably completely wrong, but I don't know. Anyway, so you can add around 2 to 3 frames per second here, just from the shadow play recording. I usually capture things with a capture card, but I use this 5080 as my capturing PC most of the time because it's my personal PC, and I do my editing and everything on this 5080 machine. But I had to capture the console settings, and now if I have to show you the performance of the 5080, I have to set up a secondary PC, which I'm busy doing that. It should be ready by next week, but for now we're just using shadow play for this. Like, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes the game does look good, right? For example, over here you zoom in a little bit, like, I don't know, there is some good qualities about the game. I just think overall the performance is just lacking. All right, so enough of that. I'm going to first do some preset scaling. Let's just see if we can get 60 frames per second on the high preset. Spoiler alert, no. Right, 51 frames per second. It's rough. Usually there's a much bigger performance delta, no pun intended, between the high preset and the ultra preset. Over here, it's so fine, it's about 15 to 20%, but it's still very heavy. 4K high preset, no 60 frames per second. I don't think we will even see it on the low preset, right? So let's on the medium preset, I mean. So let's go to the medium preset. 50 frames per second. Like, what is this? It's 4K, but look at the pop-in of the shadows and the lighting. It should not be this heavy. Yes, I know I'm criticizing the performance, but that's what I do on this channel. I don't always just criticize performance, but I talk about performance. And when performance is rough, I feel like it needs to be said. Okay, so I just want to see if we can, like, we can't even maintain 60 frames per second here with just grass and trees. Now we go down to the swamp, it drops down to 48. All right, so let's see the low preset. Can the low preset save us here? I mean, we're not going to be doing anything here. Okay, so 60 frames per second feels much better. No, I don't want to go that way. It's the mud is so annoying. It's so irritating. Yes, I did die to the mud. Yes, I am a noob. I honestly don't remember the game that well. So when I started playing it, I was completely overwhelmed by the amount of cutscenes and radio calls, and by how long they are. Some of these radio calls are minutes long. It is a Kojima game, so it is to be expected, right? But it's also the reason why I stopped playing Death Stranding. It was overwhelming, and over here it's no different. Okay, so we are seeing 98% GPU usage at times. So even on the low preset, I expect us to drop below 60 frames per second in more demanding areas. So I don't know where I'm going. I honestly don't know. We are going the right way. So let me just reset the numbers again. I'm going to change it back and just see if we use DLSS, what DLSS settings we need to use to maintain 60 frames per second, if at all. So I mean, you could see there we were dropping below 60 frames per second on the low preset. Like that is, and there's nothing going on here. There's no ambient occlusion, there's no shadows, there's no, I don't know. I mean, there's some very little. It's very, very, very disappointing, I'd say. Okay, anyway, enough of that. Let's just go down to the ultra preset again. I want to see if we enable DLSS, if we can get 60 frames per second, right? There's a stark difference between the low and the ultra preset here. Like, the low preset looks horrible. I'd say 51 frames per second here. This is actually one of the least horrible areas, well, this specific one. So DLSS quality is actually DLSS ultra quality, okay? The internal render resolution, and DLSS balanced is actually DLSS quality. So they messed that up a bit. I don't know. Can I please get up? Okay, I see. So I fell off there because the rope's broken, and I tilted that way. Okay, I'll give him that. That's interesting. Okay, so 60 frames per 57, 54. I just want to get to this settlement area because it is actually one of the more demanding areas. I want to see if we can maintain 60. We won't. Okay. Like even DLSS ultra quality, fine. We can drop down to DLSS performance if need be. It's 53. I'm not going to, as I said, I'm not going to benchmark too long in this at 4K. Let's do DLSS balanced. Alright, closer to 60. So even though the game has a 60 frames per second cap, I've seen it on the console and on PC. Sometimes it'll go past it, and especially on console on the 30 frames per second mode, it's very uneven. It goes 30, 31, 30, 31. Not a locked 30 frames per second experience. I mean, it drops below 30 a lot of times anyway. Alright, so this is not... okay, so 55. This seems to be a little bit of a more demanding area. And then let's just do performance. Yeah, Benchmark Boy made a Twitter post about the internal render resolution, so you can check it out. It applies to FSR as well. So actually, DLSS performance, I think we should be able to maintain 60 frames per second here. And I mean, it still looks good enough, I'd say. Override the DLSS version. Make sure you're using DLSS 4 transformer model, and it'll look good even on performance, right? So one other test that I want to do is I just want to go down to the high preset and use DLSS quality and see if we can maintain 60 frames per second. Yeah. Again, 99%. Okay. That's unfortunate. We are dropping below 60. And as I said, there are more demanding areas after this. So it might be... I mean, there have been a few guys that benchmarked it. I'm late to the party, but I did not get a code. So let's just try DLSS balance, which is actually DLSS quality. I'm going to keep on saying that because I need you guys to remember that. Though I do think that on the high preset with DLSS set to balanced in the menu, we should be able to maintain 60 frames per second most of the time. I don't remember if I mentioned it during the 1440p run, but this is version 1.1.2, but it did not include any performance fixes. All right, so on that note, I'm going to say thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.